Welcome to today's episode of Game Changers Collective. I'm your host, Cassie Manner, and today I am joined by Dr. Mariela Podolski. She is a longtime client of mine and a wonderful psychiatrist out of West Hartford, Connecticut. Her business name is Podolski Psychiatry, and we are going to talk about all things healing, trauma, and living in today's hectic world. So let's get into the episode. Welcome to today's episode of Game Changers Collective. I am joined by Dr. Mariela Podolski. She is a psychiatrist located in Connecticut, and we are so excited to chat today. Mariela, how are you doing?
Good. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Cassie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you for being here. So, your story is incredibly unique. What originally inspired you to go into psychiatry, and what moment made you realize this is the work I'm meant to do?
I think it was fate. I always say, right, I have answered this question before, and my career has been somehow magically happened to me. I had this moment in my life when I remember driving in my dad's car, and it was in the back. And I had the moment of thinking, I'm going to be a child psychiatrist. I must have been like 12 years old. And I have this memory, but I don't never really continued on that path. When I was in high school, I really liked my psychology class. I was very interested in it. And that made me interested in the human behavior. I was also a ballerina in high school, and I really enjoyed that. I wanted to be a professional ballerina, but instead I was interested in science, and I decided to go into medical school thinking that I could still dance. Obviously, you can't do both, but that was my thought at the time as a 16-year-old. So, yeah, so I went into medical school, and I ended up going into psychiatry, a little bit of, I think, finding that creative side of myself in psychiatry. If you think about all the medical specialties, I think this is the most creative one. And that's how I ended up being a psychiatrist. And then later on, one thing led to another, and I became interested in child psychiatry. So I pursued that as well.
Very cool. So, what is one misconception about mental health or psychiatry that you wish every person could unlearn today?
I consider a very big misconception of psychiatry or mental health is that people often think is a lack of willpower that creates conditions or illness, and it is not. When we have the struggles that people have in mental illness, there are so many different factors that go into that. And definitely willpower is not in the equation when we consider if there is what is causing mental illness. So many layers: biology, environment, our diet, our genetics, everything plays a part. It's nobody's fault at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. There's so many factors that can play into it. And I think that's so important for anyone to understand on their path to healing 100%. So, when people think of psychiatry, they often imagine medication first. How would you describe what psychiatry truly is? Because, like, when I think in my brain, if someone was like, "What's the difference between a psychologist and like a psychiatrist?" I'd be like, "Oh, a psychiatrist can write prescription, right?" Like, as a normal person, that's just like that's what comes to mind. So, how would you describe what psychiatry truly is and how it differentiates?
Thank you for asking that question. People often have that misconception of a psychiatrist is a psychologist that can prescribe medication. There's so much more that goes into it. So, first of all, we went to medical school. I know I'm a psychiatrist now, but I did everything from pediatrics to surgery to delivering babies to understanding the heart, or everything else that a medical student would do when I received my MD degree back then. And so you learn about the body. And more, I think now it's a very exciting time in psychiatry because for the first time ever, we are truly putting a lot of emphasis on the connection between our body and our mind. And so we used to think that it was all in our head and they were almost like separated, right? But we now know very well that everything is connected, particularly things like the gut microbiome and how that affects our mental health, and our hormones and how that affects mental health. And these things are require extra training that we have under our wings when we go to medical school, and then we complete a psychiatry residency. And there are so many things that go into psychiatry, Cassie. Like, for instance, it's not only medication, right? Yes, medication is a big part of what I do, but it is really understanding our bodies, our emotional well being, and then the neurological pathways in our brain and how they work and putting it all together. And sometimes medications are a part of what I do, and sometimes they're not. So it's not always as simple as that.
Yeah, don't I think it's the one that a lot of people have, and I love that you mentioned gut microbiome, because everyone's like, "Oh, yeah, I have a gut feeling," and people have always said that, but they don't really understand that your gut is like your second mind and that it affects so much. Is there anything that you wanna, like, share around that? Because I think that's so interesting, and it's something that we're all affected by because we all eat food, we all have guts.
I think the gut microbiome would require a separate podcast altogether. And maybe that's something we can look into. But the,
Yeah.
um, the bottom line is our gut is a big, big producer of serotonin. Actually, we produce most of our serotonin in our gut and not in our brain. And so yeah, I know, right? Like you wouldn't think that.
Yeah.
So when we think about mental health, if we don't pay attention to our gut, we are not really tackling what needs to be done, right? Because serotonin, as I said, produced there, and there are many loops between our brain and our gut that are in constant communication. And in the microbiome, so many bacteria that we have in our gut is going to be part of the synthesis of neurotransmitters or the breaking down neurotransmitters, and they are in constant communication. So having a healthy gut is going to be having a healthy brain. They're 100% connected, and it's beautiful. I get excited when I talk about this because
Yeah.
before we truly understood it, and I don't think we understand all of it, but we definitely are understanding more and more about this connection. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and so for anybody listening, so serotonin is the happiness chemical, is that correct? So,
It's
like,
not
what
the
makes
only
us feel
one.
happy or okay, yeah, tell us about serotonin a little bit.
Yeah, so serotonin is one of our neurotransmitters. Serotonin is associated to the contentment and being happy, I would say, but not happy as in dopamine gives us the happiness of pleasure. But
Mm,
serotonin was associated back when they started using medications in psychiatry. For instance, one of the things that we really banked on was increasing levels of serotonin in patients who are depressed or have anxiety disorders or they have OCD. So that increase in serotonin is going to help patients feel much happier and feel better and decrease anxiety symptoms. If you don't have serotonin, you don't feel good. That's uh, that's the bottom line. And going back to the gut, you need to have a good gut to produce good serotonin.
yeah, that's value right there. I mean, that's something that I think most people don't know. I didn't know that, and I like to think that I'm, like, pretty well educated in terms of, like, wellness and how important what we eat is, but I didn't even know that, so thank you for sharing.
Yeah, of course.
So why do you believe so many people are struggling with anxiety, depression, and overwhelm right now, even more than, say, 10 years ago?
Yeah, I brought some stats for that. I
Okay,
brought some
let's hear it.
statistics. Yeah, so in 2015, we had about 7% of US adults had depressive symptoms. 7%. This is 11 years ago now. Okay. In 2025, between 11 and 13% of adults report depressive symptoms. That's double, right, of what it was years ago. And then in adolescents, it's up to 19%. 19% of adolescents struggling with depressive symptoms, and in young adults is about 15%. In 2015, and going back 11 years, 12% of adults had an anxiety disorder in a given year. And in 2025, about 19.1% of adults, which is 42.5 million people in the United States, report an anxiety disorder. So it's it's a lot, and that's in adults. In adolescents, it's even worse. In adolescents, so we talked about depression at 19%, 31% of adolescents have an anxiety disorder. the numbers are scary. We are in crisis, and there are so many layers that contribute to this. So where do we even start, right? Again, all of these questions have very, very long answers, but I think let's start with our access to information. And I think that is one of the big, big factors that is contributing to anxiety and depressive symptoms today. I was telling a patient today, I sound like my grandparents back in the old days, but it's true. Let's think about it for a moment. Back in the old days, you may watch the news at 6 p.m., you turn off the news, and that was that. You read the newspaper in the morning if you got the newspaper, and that's it, right? We are bombarded with information 24/7, 165 days a year. So when we have that constant information coming in, our brain gets overloaded. And here's the thing, Cassie, that overload of information creates decision paralysis. When when you have so many things to worry about, you you can't really discern, this is important to me, this is not important to me. And now all of a sudden we carry the weight on our shoulders of things that we have no power over. I don't want to get into politics, but I mean, it's a big topic right now, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying if you can go online or on any social media platform and you'll find information about an injustice that is happening in France, in Canada, in, I don't know, in Iran, in anywhere. You have no power of change. And yet, now you have consumed that information. Now, the problem is that 3 minutes later, you learn about another injustice is happening. And you also learn about what happened in your own town. And you also learn about what happened at the federal level. And you also learn about all of these things. It's a snowball of bad news and information 365 days, 24/7. And we just cannot. This is not how our brain is supposed to work. It creates a lot of anxiety because we have no power over these things. We can't change them. And that makes people feel surrendered to the idea that they are potentially just, there's nothing else that we can do. And also there is guilt, because if you don't worry about those things, then you don't care about humanity. There's a lot of, I think, criticism from our own peers about like you don't have an opinion about whatever it is that is happening in the world. Like you don't have an opinion about the politics in this country. You don't have an opinion about this. So we're almost forced by our own peers to have opinions about things that we have no control over. And I think that is one, the constant access is creating a lot of anxiety. That's my first thought. Then we can't deny social media. That's the numbers are very clear. I don't know if you are familiar with that book called The Anxious Generation. If you aren't, it's a fantastic read by psychologist Jonathan Haidt, where he walks us through what has happened since social media platforms came out. But more importantly, mobile phones are in our hands and we have access 24/7. Those numbers in adolescents in particular are scarier because they are more vulnerable to the constant comparison between them and their peers, because they're more vulnerable to the fear of missing out. So I know that sounds kind of silly, but I do a presentation about social media in adolescents. And if you go to PubMed, which is a very big database of research articles, and you type FOMO, FOMO, there's hundreds of articles on this for
Oh my goodness.
teenagers. I know. I was like, oh my God, can't believe that. You're much younger than me, but probably when you were growing up too, or at least when I was growing up for sure. If Rachel and Mary got together after school on Tuesday and they didn't invite me, I had no clue about it. But now when I'm the only one in the class who was excluded, or the one in the group that was excluded, I'll know about it, right? That's what kids are experiencing. Life
Yeah, and
happens.
everybody else knows about it too because they'll tag everybody that they're with, and then your name's not there and everyone shares it. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. I graduated college before like all of like the really heavy like tagging and the stories and all that before that was really a thing, but I can't imagine what it's doing to kids.
Absolutely. Already when you're a teenager, your almost job in the world is to define who you are. And you define who you are by separating from your family. That is very normal. We all should be arguing with our parents when we are teenagers. Otherwise, we're doing something wrong because we need to separate from our parents and define who we are by comparing ourselves to our peers, right? That's a normal part of life. It's beautiful. It happens at the right time, every time in every life. Around 13, 14 years old, this is what the brain is thinking. And so now they have to compare themselves and be excluded on a regular basis of things that we were all excluded from, but it wasn't thrown in our face and we didn't have to deal with it. And now what is very interesting is these teenagers don't know what is a world without fear of missing out. They don't understand that that is a possibility. And they're anxious when they're following their friends on their app and knowing where they are and they see them moving and they were not there, et cetera, et cetera. The numbers about self-harm and suicide attempts and emergency visits for teenagers since the start of social media in our hands have climbed up drastically. And they are particularly scary for teenagers and adolescents and maybe young adults, not for the older group. Why not for adults? Because the comparison is less important, right? Like we don't care as much about that comparison, but teenagers do. So that is definitely a big part. And then I also think the last thing that I'm going to say is this constant dopamine surge and the inability that we have as a society to deal with boredom and lack of stimulation. Because if we are constantly looking for immediate gratification, and we do it all the time, I do it. I'm not saying that I don't, right? When I have to order something, I don't go to a supermarket if I need it tomorrow. I order it online. Don't you? I mean, of course, right? Like this is what we do. It's immediate gratification. When I was young, we had to wait months maybe or weeks to be able to go to the store to get whatever we wanted. And we really practiced that delayed gratification. But now we don't practice it enough. So that immediate gratification and the absence of boredom stimulates our brain to the point that we require high levels of dopamine to function and to feel good. And when we don't have that dopamine, when we're not scrolling, when we're not watching a show on Netflix, when we're not engaging in maybe some more risky activities like using drugs or alcohol, when we're not doing something that is going to bring immediate pleasure through dopamine, then we experience that dysphoria or difficulty managing our emotions.
No, 100%. I've been seeing this. I don't know if you've seen it. It's like this challenge people are doing on social media where they sit and do nothing for an hour, but they record themselves doing it in like a time lapse. So it's literally just a video of people. It's like a challenge because it's so hard for people to do it. And then they're having to record it and then they turn it into a social media post. But even just the concept of sitting and doing nothing without a phone in your hand is just this crazy, crazy concept that people are filming themselves doing. Like it's so interesting to watch someone do that.
There was a meme a few years ago that said he showed up at the cafe with no phone, no book, and nothing in his hands and sat there like a psychopath. That was the meme. Like,
Yeah,
isn't that what we did before? Like we
right.
just got used to always having that constant stimulation of, and it's not good for our brains.
Yeah. Yeah, my boyfriend and I, we leave one phone at home, right? So we bring like one phone so we can like have help if we need it, but like do not disturb when we're like going out for the day on a date or whatever. Just leaving my phone at home and not having it physically with me. When I first started doing it, it was almost like this sense of like fear. It was like I was less safe. It was like was being shot at all the time, and I like took my vest off to go out in the world. Like I didn't have my phone, but then now I feel actually less anxious when I don't have my phone with me than when I do. I used to feel more anxious if I didn't have it because I was like, oh, what if something goes wrong and I need help? And then now I realize like, oh, I'm fine. So leaving my phone at home actually feels really good. And then we also have like a little wicker basket that we put our phones in with like a top on it. And that has helped us to be so much more productive, spend so much more intentional quality time together. Like we play chess, we read, just the out of sight, out of mind of like putting it into a drawer, putting it in somewhere. It's just been really helpful. So are there any ways that you could kind of teach, say someone in the new year, their resolution is, I want to do, less scrolling, less time on my phone, any tools or challenges or tactics or anything that you offer to start kind of building that muscle of phone resilience?
I think that's brilliant, leaving one of your phones at home. Because the other thing that I didn't mention before when you say what do you think is contributing? The other thing is that we are never present in the here. We're always present in the here and there, right? So that concept of I'm going to be present where my 2 feet are can only happen if you have eliminated the distraction that the phone brings and the fragmenting of your attention, that every ding and every notification from a text message or like you might not want to engage into the work phone call that you're receiving in the middle of dinner, but now you received it. So now you're thinking about it. So now it took away from that. So I definitely think that eliminating it completely and putting in the basket, are you saying, or leaving it at home is brilliant, right? It's just completely out of sight, out of mind. That being said, what I tell my patients in my assessments when I meet with any and all of my new patients, I do this with adolescents. I love doing this because every time I get the same response, same one. So I ask them my standard questions. I have a pretty standardized questions that I'm going to ask them. And after I ask them about how they're sleeping, I ask them about their digital use and their phone use. So I work a lot. I work with all ages, but I have a lot of adolescent patients. And so they all get immediately kind of sweaty. And I ask them, so what is your relationship with your phone? And they all say, well, I use it too much, but it's because maybe last week I used it more than I should, but it's because I was sick or because there's always an excuse. And then I do this exercise and I tell them, let's pull out your screen time. And so we do screen time in my office. I ask them to show me their screen time.
Put them on the spot.
Yeah, we put them on the spot. We talk about it. And they, without a doubt, I know what they're going to say is like, they are surprised by the amount of screen time that they use. That simple exercise. Let's look at your screen time. And then they come up with a million excuses. Well, that day I was, and I left it on, but I really wasn't using it. I'm like, okay, well, let's go back to last week. Let's just look at last week. And so we go back to the previous week and it's even worse. And they come up with another excuse. And then after a few trials of this, because it gives you 4 weeks at a time, I tell them, let's talk about what is really happening here. How is this healthy for you? And they are also in a young mind, and this is easier with adults, but in their young minds, they can recognize that this is really affecting how they feel and how their mental health is presenting. When you're using, I think my worst one was 18 hours a day, an average.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. When I tell
Wow.
you this is an epidemic, it is an epidemic.
Yeah.
You probably, I mean, Cassie, when you probably think like I don't know what is your average, and I'm not going to put you in your spot. I'm not going to make you pull out your screen time. But
Yeah.
for me, when my phone hits 3 hours in a day, I'm panicked. Like, what was I doing 3 hours on my phone? These kids, in average, the most frequent numbers are around 8 to 10 hours a day in my office. And that is average, meaning there are days that is more, right? And when you think about it, if you are using your phone for 8 hours a day and you go to school for about 8 hours a day and you're sleeping for 8 hours a day, there is really no room to feel good, right? So to answer your question, which was what suggestions do you have? The first one is look at your screen time. Just let's be aware of the problem. what is the problem? Let's have an honest moment and say, yeah, I find myself every morning, instead of getting out of bed, scrolling for an hour. Or I find myself, instead of engaging at lunch with my friends, I am in the corner looking at social media platforms. Number two, I learned this from somebody else, but turning the screen black and white makes it less interesting. So you're less likely to get stuck scrolling if you have that. What I
Yes, and for
do,
anyone who wants to do that, you go in I've done this with mine, you go into accessibility, right? You change it to, like, grayscale. I
Mhm.
think if anybody wants to try and do that, ask ChatGPT, go on Google, you can ask how to do it, but it's under the accessibility settings.
yes. And then another thing that I have done, which I find to be the most helpful for me in particular, is I have a Facebook account, so on my phone. And so that app, I delete it from my phone. And so when I do this with purpose, I find myself reaching for my phone, looking to go on my Facebook app multiple times in one day. That habit that I have formed, if you delete the app, it doesn't delete your account. So it's not like you're going to lose all of your data. And then what I do, and I have shared this with my patients, is if I decide I want to use it again, then with intent, I download it and I set a limit for myself. I'm going to use it for this much time, and then I delete it again. And that has really helped me have more control. And I think it has helped my patients too. There are other things you can do. There are some apps and some devices that you can actually lock your phone, right? Not the screen time block, because that you can bypass very easily. There is something called this little device called Brick that you tap your phone and it locks it physically. So you go about your day, and then your phone is locked.
Yeah, no, I think the screen time limits per app, because you can set it per app. So, like, that's what I use. I own a digital marketing agency. I work in social media, and so have to have the apps on my phone, have to be able to go there and check stuff and all of that. But what I do is I set a 30-minute limit per like Instagram, per TikTok. So I can go in, I could check on all our clients. Like I have to use that time wisely to check on client stuff and then, get out of there. And that's really smart ways like setting those locks. And what I've seen people do also is they have their partner, a friend, someone that they can ask if they need to, but they have them set the passcode lock. So they actually can't bypass it when that limit hits. They can't get into it themselves. So I think that that's a fun, smart way to do it as well.
I think it's important, Cassie, to take 2 seconds to tell you a little bit about my thoughts on social media and adolescence, because it's related to this anxiety and depression that we're seeing. I tell parents, leaving the teenager in particular to their own devices, literally, to do this on their own is asking the impossible. These apps were created 100% with a lot of science behind them on how they were going to keep you engaged, and the app makes money behind it, right? So they created phenomenal apps for that purpose, and they're going to keep the user engaged for hours upon hours upon hours sometimes. And so I think that it is very clear our adolescents and young adults are powerless when it comes to stopping on their own. So the parents have to intervene. Like, it's unfair to ask a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old to do this on their own. And it's easy to some degree. I know the teenagers find ways and smart ways to go around it, but if you have a passcode, at least for my own household, this is what I do. I have a 14-year-old, and we don't have any social media for him, but for the time limits on the phone, I set it up on my phone, and then there's that passcode that you're talking about, so he can get more time, even if he wanted. And so far, I don't know why, but he hasn't been able to figure it out otherwise. Simple things like this, like don't put the code in front of your child, because I know, we laugh and we think like
Yeah.
it's like, really? But I kid you not, these are the things that sometimes teenagers tell me. It's like, well, I saw the codes, and why wouldn't I use it? So that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even just bridging the gap between what I do and what you do, I read in Gaber Monte's book, The Myth of Normal. Have you read that one?
I haven't read it yet, but I have it. I
Oh,
bought it.
it's
Mhm.
super good. You should read it. He does go a little political in it at times, but I mean, I think he's trying to make the same point that you are with the politics. And so he talks about the fact that there is a new field of psychology called neuromarketing. You can go into neuromarketing as like a degree where it's all about how to get consumers hooked on things where they're studying neurology, but as a means to the end of selling products and services and making them better in terms of, junk food, what they put in it to make it addictive and all that stuff. And yeah, I think without the education from people like yourself, it's so hard for people to know, why do I feel this way and how do I navigate it? And because we just get so much noise all day. And all these companies with billions of dollars are working against us to keep us addicted to all these things. So, okay, so is there a mindset shift that you wish the entire world would make around mental health pertaining to all these things that we're discussing?
I think there are a couple of things. So the mindset shift that I would like for people to have is that mental health, number one, shouldn't be a privilege, is a right. And that mental health comes in layers and layers and layers of things that really are affecting our environment. These changes have to come from a bigger scale. Like myself and my office here in West Hartford, I'm not going to be the one changing social media apps, right? But there are people who need to be held accountable for how this is affecting us. And it comes back to it's a basic right to have mental health. And we should all have that. It's not a privilege. I would love for it to be spoken about in a more comprehensive manner where we don't question why somebody is asking for help or why somebody is struggling, but we try to create an environment that is going to be leading for them to have a better mental health pathway forward. That's one thing. But I definitely think that we also have to think as a society when we step back and we think about why mental health needs to be a right and not a privilege is because if you have parents, if you as a child have parents that have mental health issues, the likelihood of you having mental health issues is skyrocket high, right? Not only genetics, there's also genetics to play into that, but the environment that you grow up. If you're in a household where there is abusive relationships, you yourself are going to be more likely to not only have PTSD, but also repeat that cycle with your own child. Right? It keeps growing generation after generation, and it adds to the problem that we're having right now. We all want society to be made of functional adults, people who can bring the best to the table, people who can thrive, right? This is what we want. We want that for our population. So mental health has to be part of the conversation.
And so, what does healing actually look like in real life, beyond the buzzwords?
Healing is again many layers. Okay, so we can talk about like the layers of healing, but we also have to change this narrative of healing or being well means a complete absence of pain and being happy all the time. Quote unquote, I tell my patients, if you were happy all the time, that would be wrong and weird. It's not the absence of pain. We cannot say that healing is the absence of pain or the absence of distress, or the lack of difficulties in life. That's not healing. Healing is being able to experience pain and recover from it. But we all should be experiencing pain. It's part of life. If you are not able to cry because a significant person in your life passed away and you're not able to feel that sadness, that would be wrong. I think we have a society gotten into a chasing always of this perfect state of mind with no distress, where there is no anxiety, there is no sadness and no fear. And if you are not achieving that, then you're not well. It's the message, right? That we got into this wellness industry and everybody has to be always happy and always good and always. fit and always healthy. And that's just not human. Something as simple as anxiety, I tell my patients all the time, anxiety is necessary for survival. If we were in the caveman time and were chased by a lion, if you're not anxious, you're dead, right? So it's important to experience anxiety when the time is right. It's important to experience pain and sadness when the time is right.
Beautiful. I love that. So, what's your approach to blending traditional psychiatry with lifestyle, holistic, or alternative methods?
I am very lucky. I when I completed my child and adolescent psychiatry fellowship, I really was interested in eating disorders. This has been my passion since years and years. And I have worked with patients with eating disorders in all levels of care. And that brought me to meet Dr. James Greenblatt, who is a guru of functional psychiatry and or integrative psychiatry. And I worked at the same company. He was my boss and my mentor. And I was really lucky that after I met him and I worked with him, I learned what he did in functional psychiatry and I completed a fellowship in something called functional psychiatry. And it's what I have been doing since then. This was in 2020. And that is psychiatry looks at what would be called the root cause of why some of the symptoms are manifesting. We try to find more evidence from micronutrient deficiencies, from gut dysbiosis, like talking about the bacteria in your gut not being balanced, from some absorption problems in your gut, or if you have something as simple as Lyme disease and how is that affecting your mental health, right? Your symptoms of whatever it is. I was very lucky I completed this fellowship and then I have been practicing what is called integrative psychiatry, which combines functional psychiatry with regular psychiatry, which is I'm still a physician, I still have you know, a prescription pad, I still prescribe medications, but in my assessments and with my patients, I combine the two things together. And it's beautiful. It has given me so many more results that I'm happy about. And my patients feel so much better with that approach when we're really looking and really targeting treatment to that individual person. It's wonderful.
So, is there a universal pattern or belief you consistently see holding people back from who they want to be?
You think it would be fear? I think people being afraid is really what holds people back. What else holds us back? Like than being afraid what others are going to
Right.
think or we're going to fail or that's all that holds us back. Nothing else holds us back. It's always fear.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, what surprises you the most about the human brain and our emotional patterns, especially regarding fear?
I I think what is the most surprising is that we have the power of change within us. If you change the way you're thinking, the world is your oyster. But you have to start there. You have to change how you're thinking. We oftentimes, and I go back to this, being bombarded with information, right? We oftentimes just turn on the news or turn on something and it's all bad news and bad news. I mean, how are you going to be thinking? You're going to be thinking all in the negative. If you start finding the good things and start changing those thoughts, instead of saying, I'm worried, say, I'm excited, right? Instead of saying, it'll be so boring, you say, oh, it might be relaxing, right? Like start finding some of these positive changes. If we learn how to flip the coin, the possibilities are all of them that you have in front of you, but you have to change the way you think. That's the most beautiful thing about our mind. It's so malleable. You can make it happen.
Yeah, so like a little bit of reprogramming, interrupting those patterns of always, reacting in the same way or doing the same thing. So for a lot of people, I think, when they hear like that programming or, the patterns and a lot of it came from like nurture, right? So it came from what they experienced growing up, how their parents were and their close, people. So what role does childhood play in the challenges adults face today and how much of it can we actually change?
That is going back to a previous question where I told you, where mental health is a right and not a privilege. And childhood defines who we are. It really does. What happened to us before repeats itself throughout our lives. So it's really important when we decide to have kids as society, when we make that decision, what we're bringing towards our kids, and make sure that we have taken care of our mental health stability if we can. If we have had the recognition of it, if we've had the options of getting treatment, being responsible for that, because this is what we're bringing into our children's lives. That being said, there is a time in everyone's life. Life is not fair. Things that happen in the past happen in the past, and we can't continue to think it's because this happened. At some point, nobody but you is going to have the power of change. You're the only one who can say, that's in the past, and I need to start today moving forward. The responsibility of getting better is each each person has that responsibility on their own. Like, nobody can share that. And it comes with time, right? Maybe as a child you can't, but as an adult, there has to be a moment when the individual is able to stand up on their 2 feet and say, I need to make the changes for my own recovery and make that decision.
Yeah, there's a quote that I've heard that I love. It's, "Your childhood trauma is not a life sentence." And I don't know, when I heard that, I was like, "Okay, yeah," because I thought about it that way up until right now. And then when I heard that, I was like, "Oh, okay, that's true. It doesn't have to be a life sentence."
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Can you share a moment with a patient that, of course, confidential, that truly changed you as a clinician?
Well, I've had so many of those. I am still being changed every day by my patients. It's very humbling and an honor to be in their lives, and they let me into their most vulnerable places and moments of their lives. I truly love it. But one moment that really changed me, and I think it's linked to this power of your own thoughts, is very drastic and dramatic, so be prepared. But when I was in medical school back home in Costa Rica, where I'm from, I was doing my rotation as an intern in surgery on the surgical floor. And this woman, I was rounding, we had to go around at 5 a.m. in the morning. So I was rounding, talking with all the patients in preparation for the day. And this woman had been admitted the day before for appendicitis. She was in her 30s. And appendicitis is really, I mean, it's a medical emergency, but it's not a complicated surgery. It really shouldn't pose a big risk if it is caught on time and you have the procedure that you need. And this woman, I remember very clearly being in the room, and she was drinking some water, and she pulled me in and said, I really want to die. Now, she had had surgery. It was uncomplicated. Actually, she would have been discharged that afternoon. And she told me that. Now, I was an intern in the surgical floor. I didn't have the training nor knew what to do. So I just finished rounding. It's like, we'll talk about it in a moment. And I just finished rounding. Well, that was my plan. 5 minutes later, this perfectly healthy woman who had surgery for something minimal, uncomplicated, as she was eating soft food because she just had surgery, was drinking water, she bronchoaspirated, meaning like some food went into her lungs. And she coded right there. And she had to be transferred to the ICU. 2 days later, she was intubated, unconscious, and she passed away a few days later. I know. Shocking. That story still makes me like, it's not a very it's not an uplifting story, but so many things went wrong in that scenario. Number one, I didn't have the support. Nobody had trained me. Why nobody had trained me to do something about mental health in that moment? I didn't know what to do. I should have reached out. It was a matter of minutes when this happened, and she unfortunately died. But it taught me one thing, and it's that power of your own mind. She truly had made the decision that she was going to die. And she did. I mean, she didn't end her life, but the cascade of events that happened after she made that affirmation saying, I want to die. It's undeniable that it was linked. So I think I got lost a little bit in the story when you asked me a question, a patient and a moment that had changed you. I think that that moment is of course it's a sad story, but it gave me also the kind of push for me to really go into psychiatry because I found it fascinating. And it also gave me the push to do something about when people come and tell me I really want to die. I kind of almost like made a promise that day that that would never happen again. And I think it's part of why I became a psychiatrist later on. It really changed me.
Thank you for sharing.
I'm sorry. I'm
That's
sorry. It was
okay.
like, it was,
That's
yeah, it's
okay.
a lot.
Are you
It
okay?
was a lot. Like, yeah, no, I'm fine. I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost like I'm almost grateful to her, like
Mm.
in a weird esoteric way of her, her last words while she was conscious were like, I want to die. And I was present in that moment. And here I am, right?
Mhm.
Linked, like this is all together. I
Yeah,
unfortunately
she,
don't
like,
realize.
set you on a mission of yeah, all the people
Yeah.
that you have helped and that you will help. So, what do you wish people understood about starting over, if they feel stuck, broken, behind in life, or they think they don't wanna be here from those patients that are having kinda like those thoughts? What do you wish people could understand about starting over?
You know what? I have been in the United, you're going to be like, where are you going with this answer? I've been in the United States for 18 years. I came here to study and then I stayed. Uh, 19 this year. And one thing that I am mesmerized about every year is the change of seasons. Where I come from, it rains or it doesn't rain. The temperature is kind of like the same all the time. Pretty much you always carry an umbrella because even when they say it's not going to rain, it does rain. That's it. But here, like year after year, I see the spring and the flowers start blooming. And then the heat comes in the summer. And then the windstorms in the fall and the leaves fall. And then the snow comes and it just happens cyclical, right? It's like cyclical. We go through the cycles. Life, it's like this full cycle and again and again. And when I tell patients, when people are really stuck and they don't know where to go, I tell them, like, just look at nature. Like, it reinvents itself every year from the beginning to the very end. And we're really not that different. We're biological beings. Like, we can do the same. We can reinvent ourselves again. Nothing is permanent in life. And if we can get ourselves to get into that cycle and reinvent who we are, it gives, at least it gives me a lot of hope. And I tell patients to get on that idea of like, let's start over. Starting over is okay. Nature does it every year. It starts over. We can do it too. And it's beautiful. I think it is a beautiful thing of being human. The other thing is asking for help, right, Cassie? Like being able to just raise your hand and say, like, I need help. Who can help me? It can be anyone.
If someone is listening right now in their darkest season, what is the first step you'd want them to take?
I think ask for help. There's really, it doesn't have to be a lot of people. You just need to ask for help. Someone, your friend, your neighbor, your teacher, saying the words, I am struggling, definitely can go a long way. There are resources, of course. I mean, we can always call 211, like 988, 911, or if you're in school, go to your guidance counselor or something like that. But I think more than anything, if you're really struggling, just have the confidence that if you ask for help, people will help you. I still believe in that. People will be there for you.
So, what inspired you to open your own practice rather than staying within the traditional medical system?
The story happened again by fate. I was in I was working as a medical director in an inpatient psychiatric unit that treated eating disorders. I really loved my job. It was fabulous. I really enjoyed it. But the unit closed out of the blue, they decided to close it. It was COVID 2020. And so I had to reinvent myself, just like nature. And with that, I started my own private practice and I really enjoy it. And it gives me the luxury of following patients for longer, getting to really know them, understand what are their difficulties, what are their strengths, their weaknesses, what makes them happy. It's an honor to be by their side throughout their life.
It's amazing. And you get to, yeah, ensure that you can stay with them long term. So, how do you balance being a psychiatrist, a business owner, a mom, and of course, a human being with all your own emotional needs?
I definitely think being kind to myself, I aim for giving my best effort to in everything, but not perfection, as I know that I'm not able to do it all is it's just really hard. Being a parent is really hard, and being a working parent is harder. So I think with a lot of kindness and to my own self and understanding that there's always tomorrow to do more. I don't think I have a good answer to that because every day is a little bit of a juggle and every day looks different. There are some days that I'm super mom and there are some days where I'm not super mom and I am super psychiatrist, right? It depends on what's happening. But with a lot of kindness, some chocolate too.
Yeah, there's some days when you're just a super chocolate eater, and that's okay too. Yeah, I mean, I think people need to hear that, right? We don't all always have it together all the time, especially as social media would have you believe. So, how does mental health impact our relationships, and what patterns do you see most often between couples or families? And you mentioned, being a mom, being a parent. I'm not a parent. Well, to a fur baby, I am, but not a human being. So, no, it's a very difficult job in and of itself. So, what patterns do you see most often between couples, family?
That's a question that doesn't have a unique answer because it depends on what's going on with somebody. I definitely, as I said before, the repetitive things in life, like what happened to us in our childhood, we're more likely to bring on in our relationships and in our uh, relationships with others, significant others, friends, siblings, and also with our own children. And I think we need to be aware of what those patterns are. And if we like them, there are things that I like about my childhood that I want to continue. And there are obviously things that I don't like that I don't want to pass on to my children. So I don't think that I have like a one answer to that question. But what I would say to that is, as adults, it's important for us to be responsible of observing what those are and deciding what we want to keep and what we're pruning out.
That makes sense. Going back to kind of being a mom and a business owner, so high achiever, of course, high achievers often struggle silently. So, what do you wish driven entrepreneurs, leaders, or creatives understood about mental health?
Again, that it's a right and not a privilege. It affects all of us. I mean, find high achievers because I think by the high achievers, then there's always like, but look at such and such. They're more of a high achiever. So am I a high achiever? Like that's a difficult definition. But I think for people who really want it all and who are like always setting the bar higher, how to navigate that again with kindness, Cassie. Like you in mental health, like those falls are going to happen. It's part of life. We can't have absence of pain. So when those moments happen, when those falls happen and you're bruised, get yourself up with kindness and take the next step. I think allowing ourselves to be vulnerable is very important and being honest with ourselves.
So, in terms of menopause and perimenopause, how does that affect mental health for women that are in that stage of life?
That's such a good topic. It's not until recently that this has been brought to light. And we know that perimenopause and menopause are affecting mental health in a lot of women who are in their 40s and their 50s. And now keep in consideration that perimenopause can last 10 years, right? So from the time that you enter perimenopause to the time you hit menopause, it can be 10 years. And the symptoms that some women are experiencing are so severe in terms of not only their physical symptoms, but also their mental health symptoms and things like anxiety and depression, but also OCD and a lot of difficulties with their physical symptoms can be present during this period of time. I think we have more and more paid attention to this, and there's this big movement in medicine towards removing, actually, it was removed not that long ago, the black box warning that prevented women from getting hormonal replacement treatment. And now we're able to do that for our patients and give them, not me, I'm a psychiatrist, but their OBGYNs or primary care doctors. And I think it is really important. If you hear physicians like Mary Claire Haber, who is a phenomenal menopause doctor, if you hear her talking about how when she was in training as an OBGYN, she had almost no training on menopause, none. And when I tell you that I had one lecture that was 1 hour when I was in medical school, that's all I got. In my psychiatry residency, I got zero training in menopause or perimenopause. And now years later, well, I'm 48, I'm well in perimenopause, and that is so clear. And it really started affecting me as a person, as a woman. I didn't get to know about what it meant for other women if it hadn't been for my own personal experience, even though I'm a physician and I am a psychiatrist. And so now in my practice, when I have a woman who comes in for an evaluation who is in her 40s or early 40s, I asked about their status of menopause or perimenopause. And I also, if it is indicated, I asked them to do a consultation with somebody who is a menopause doctor. And I want to say 70% of those women get on HRT and they don't come back to see me, which is very telling.
Yeah.
So I
And
I
so,
really like that.
yeah, so what age is kind of like the earliest where women can start to experience that?
I mean, it is rare to experience this in your late 20s or early 50s, but definitely can happen. But we're talking more like the more typical range would be 45 to 55 when this is happening, right? Like a little bit older. But it can really happen at any time. And the physical symptoms are very different. Like they range from a variety of symptoms that almost like make no sense. So women have symptoms that are like, I feel weird. Okay. That doesn't
They
mean
just
anything,
off.
right? But yeah, women feel weird. They complain about mental fogginess. They complain about the weight gain that comes out of nowhere in the middle of their bodies, particularly in their abdominal area, the decrease in sex drive, the increase in irritability, the forgetfulness, disorganization, and then the physical symptoms that are like shoulder pain and pain in your knees and pain in your ankles and this sharp pains, your ears itching. There's so much that is secondary to menopause that we didn't know about, and we just assumed it was you're a woman, you're in your midlife crisis, your kids are leaving the house, of course you're cranky and are complaining about these things. Years later, we figure like you give this women HRT, hormonal replacement therapy, when you're a good candidate for it, and not everybody is, but if you are, and the majority of the symptoms, including the hot flashes and difficulty sleeping, goes away. So it is a very important part of mental health in women.
What habits have you found personally transformative in your own mental well-being?
So I have created this list of things that I call the boring things. And I call it the boring things because they're really not exciting and they're not fun and nobody really wants to do them. And yet, if you are able to do these 7 things that I call the boring things, you are creating a great scaffolding for your mental health. And it really helps progress in terms of feeling better quickly. 1, sleep. Sleep is so important. Going to bed at the same time every day, waking up at the same time every day, and prioritizing our sleep is number 1. I know, boring, but important. 2 is diet. Whatever we're eating, right? Make sure that you're eliminating the ultra processed foods, that you're eliminating the sugar, that you're trying to eat a healthy, balanced diet that has protein, that has enough fruits and vegetables and plants, and also has fiber to feed our microbiome, has all the micronutrients that we need. That is going to be super important for our gut, which means it's really important for our brain. Three is hydration. We need to drink water. That's just part of well being. Drinking water, enough water every day. It helps like regulate our blood pressure and our heart rate, and it makes us feel better. Number four is exercise, some movement. You don't have to go to the gym every day. It's fine if you don't like it. Just moving your body is important for us to feel good. Number five is engagement in the community, talking to our friends, having face to face conversations with others, having an engagement, whether that is through work or through going to school or through volunteering or through the neighborhood. It doesn't matter, but having engagement with other humans is really important. Number six, avoid drugs and alcohol. And I know that sounds really boring, but it is really important. Drugs and alcohol do not help our brain whatsoever and make mental health worse. And the last one is be very mindful and proactive in regulating your digital time and your social media use. So the seven boring things: sleep, nutrition, hydration, exercise, engagement in the community, avoid drugs and alcohol, and finally, digital time.
Beautiful. And so I heard you mention hydration, and I think that's a huge one. So you're the doctor here, you drop the stats. What percent water are our bodies and our brains? Because I know there is an astounding percentage, but I'm not sure what it is.
You know what? I don't recall that from the top of my head. It was something actually, let me just Google it. I have to
Yeah, I know.
Google
I
this.
want to Google it. I want to see.
Let me see. I just like something like 70% or maybe something like
All right. ChatGPT says human body overall 55 to 60% water, and the human brain is 73 to 75% water. So, water, we're of water, right? Very important here.
yes.
If anybody goes to your website, they know you love the water too.
Yeah.
So, going off of that, I had a doctor tell me one time that I went for like a physical and she was like, "Oh, are you like hydrated?" And I was like, "I think so." And she like pitched my skin and she was like, "No, you're dehydrated." And I was like, "Oh." And she was saying that just being dehydrated can make you have like psychological like symptoms, like it makes you irritable, it makes you tired, not focused. Do you want to talk a little bit about what how hydration plays into like mental health and just how we're feeling, our mood and all of that?
Definitely what I think the link that I think is important for hydration and our well-being that will manifest is the physical symptoms of dehydration can be similar to the symptoms of anxiety. So when you are dehydrated, you're going to have your heart racing, your heart rate is going to be elevated, and there is this dizziness and feeling of almost like absence, like you're not present but you are, very similar to when you are very, very anxious, and it's very uncomfortable. And a lot of times too, when you are not hydrated, some people are more susceptible than others. You are more prone to having headaches and fatigue than if you are well hydrated.
What are three actionable things someone can do today to support their mental health without feeling overwhelmed?
Top three: sleep. Sleep is so important. It is a huge part of our brain reset. So much so that during sleep is when we are able to kind of break down what happened in the day and utilize those pieces of information. Some of them we let go, some of them we keep. A lot of regulation of anxiety happens during that dreaming process. We break down our experiences of the day and regulate anxiety that way. Sleep is super important. And I would say if anyone is starting to struggle, a good night's sleep can do wonders. Two, for mental health, again, I I really, really worry about what we eat. We are what we eat. Like that concept of I can eat all of this, calories in, calories out, I can eat whatever, it's fine. If we don't have micronutrients in our brain, think about it this way. I love to explain it this way. When you think about a recipe for a cake, right? You have your 4 eggs, your 1 cup of sugar, 1 cup of flour, whatever. And let's say you decided to bake a cake today and you only have 2 eggs and half a cup of sugar, but the recipe calls for something else. And so you decide to bake your cake and you put what you have in your kitchen, and knowing that it wasn't enough, you can bake the cake, but it's not a good cake, right? Okay. It's the same with our neurotransmitters. Our neurotransmitters have ingredients. And what are those ingredients? These are micronutrients. Things like vitamin B12 and vitamin D and iron and zinc and magnesium and all things that come from food. If you don't have those ingredients for your neurotransmitters, you just don't produce good neurotransmitters. And if you don't have the good chemicals in your brain, you don't have good mental health. So a lot of what we feel in our brains, well, we feel with our brains and we think with our brains, comes from what we're eating. And we're going back to the microbiome is also in constant communication. If we're not eating fiber, we're not nourishing our microbiome, and hence we're not having a healthy gut. We go back to the connection. So sleep, eat, and I think social connection. Decrease your screens and connect in person, one on one. Let's talk to a friend, go for a walk with a coworker. This little steps, little things that you can do can make a world of the difference.
Yeah. So would it be safe to say, so for number 2, we're talking about diet, 'cause I think this is it's so huge and something that we could change right now, right? Something we could change right now with our next meal. So would it be safe to say if we're in a vacuum, right? No other external factors, and you have 2 people and they're physiologically the same, but one of them is eating meat, vegetables, fruits, and the other person is eating processed foods, soda, alcohol, same exact body, just like clones. Would the person eating the processed foods and all that, would they be less, happy, energetic, cognitively clear, all of that than the other person?
100%. And there's a lot of research about this. The, the content of our food in the United States is what we call obesogenic, meaning, right, like the ultra processed foods, carbohydrates, delicious. Listen, like yes, it's delicious and highly palatable because it's chemically processed to be that way. But it has a lot of sugar. It has simple carbohydrates. Metabolically, it affects who we are, right, in terms of insulin spikes. And all of this together not only affects our microbiome, doesn't feed the microbiome because it doesn't have fiber, and also it creates inflammation. So we can see this in markers in your blood where there is inflammation in this obesogenic diets and really affects how we feel. This is not a popular topic. People don't like to talk
Yeah.
about this. And it's also, I think it makes people uncomfortable because eating healthy in terms of eating more plants, more fruits and vegetables, eating protein and fiber, and eliminating the ultra processed foods is not convenient. Again, we go back to that immediate gratification. Is now we have to go, and so it comes in a package. So much easier. But yes, to answer your question, 100%, and that's backed by data. This is not my opinion, as I always say. Science is there for a reason.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's on our top 3 action items. You mentioned, like, interacting with people face to face, one on one. Say someone's feeling like some social anxiety, they want to hang out with people in person, but they don't really know how to ask or how to bridge that gap. They feel like they only interact with people at work or digitally. Do you have any kind of like tips or tricks or even something they could say to, have an interaction like that?
Yeah, that is hard. For somebody who has social anxiety, these settings are going to be very frightening, and I can understand that. I would say most of us can identify at least one person that we could approach in a scenario, or finding a coworker that may seem a little bit also our own speed, like maybe not the social butterfly of the office. That might not be the right person to approach on day one, maybe a goal to do later. But and and just try to have a small conversation. I believe in the power of taking things like in steps. So, like day one, I don't expect somebody who has been eating junk food all day for today to have grilled chicken and a salad and like quinoa, and like that's really hard. That jump is really hard. Okay, on day one, instead of choose one thing you're gonna do. The same goes for this social anxiety person. Choose one individual in your office that you can say, how was your day yesterday? Or, hey, would you like to go for a walk later? Right? It may be something really small, but I think compound interest is really the way to go, right? Isn't it? Like we start little and then it becomes bigger. Like it can add up really quickly if you start making one thing every day.
Yeah, and I think what's important to remember too, especially, making friends as an adult can seem kind of scary. Making friends as a teenager can seem scary, but pretty much every single time you show interest in another human being and you take that first step and you connect with them, they're so happy. They're so overjoyed. They've probably been thinking the same thing about you. So, yeah.
Yeah. I read I don't know if you read that book called Let Them by Mel Robbins.
I've heard of it and it's been on my list. Is it a good one?
I liked it. I liked it a lot.
Okay.
I think it's brilliant, actually. I think Mel Robbins was brilliant in writing it. A lot of what she says in the book are really, psychological things that we use in therapy, but she translated it to the public in common terms and makes it really easy for people to understand it. But she talks a little bit about how she moved to Vermont and she was feeling so lonely. And her daughters actually forced her to go to talk to adults and be like, hey, do you want to go for a walk? And everybody was not only welcoming, but also kind of thinking the same thing of like, how do I engage with this person?
So, what signs should someone look for that indicate it's time to maybe seek professional help if they're, struggling with some of the things we've been chatting about today, but they're not sure, like, should I meet with a psychiatrist? You know, what are some kind of common signs that you think are a good jumping off place for someone to be like, okay, yeah, I think I'm ready for some professional help.
In a vacuum, if you had to make that decision alone, if this is interfering with your daily functioning, meaning your ability to maintain relationships, if it is interfering with your ability to take care of your own body, if it is not allowing you to go to work or perform at work, definitely, I think those would be signs that it's time to really not continue doing this alone. Most of us live with other people, and I think our loved ones oftentimes will point out, like, you know what? Why are you so upset lately? And in those conversations, I think we can get a lot of feedback from our loved ones on what is happening. And hopefully that would spark the need to ask for help. You can see a psychiatrist, but you can also start with, talking to the primary care doctor, the pediatrician, the school counselor. Some workplaces have like a wellness center that may offer a coach or something along those lines. I definitely think starting somewhere is more important than doing nothing. Like, not everybody has access to a psychiatrist. So that's why I think just finding what resources you have in your area and are available to you and starting there is better than suffering alone.
Thanks for sharing that. And so, what's one belief that you've had to let go of in order to step into your fullest potential and maybe helpful for our listeners to hear?
I read a lot of books.
Yeah,
So
me too.
I'm writing a book called You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero.
Yes, I love that book.
Yeah. She changed my life.
Okay.
I I started reading the book, and first of all, she's hysterical. Really
Mhm.
funny. It's a really good read. But I realized when I read that book how I was my worst enemy at any given time, you know? The constant narrative inside my head of like, oh, that's for other people, success is not for you, that type of thing. And I just had to reinvent myself, like the seasons. You just have to go into a new cycle and do it all over again. And I had to let go of believing that I'm not good enough. I had to let go of fear That's what I had to let go of.
So I always love to ask our guests at the end of the podcast, what would you say is one piece of game changing life advice that just when you had this realization or when you heard this, it just really changed the game for you?
I think it's my realization, the game changing piece is that you have the power within. It's all in your head, all of it. Everything from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed every day, every decision that you make, if you approach it one way or another, if you have the power of change, is all in your mind. You need to let go of fear and just take the next step because we all have the power. That's the beautiful thing is that it's not me, is we all have the power within for change.
Dr. Podolski, thank you so much for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure to have you today.
Thank you so much, Cassie. It has been my pleasure.